My son-in-law struck me in my own home, and I said nothing. The next day, I handed him an envelope. He smiled, thinking it was money, the $32,000 he'd demanded. Did it take a slap to wake you up? He sneered. At your age, you should know better. Just hand over the money quietly and save yourself the embarrassment. But when he opened the envelope and saw what was inside, his face went white. Hello everyone, welcome back. Before we begin, I'd love it if you could hit that like button and subscribe to stay connected with more stories like this one. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're tuning in from. I always enjoy hearing from you. Just a quick note. While this story weaves in some fictional elements for depth and insight, the lessons within are drawn from life's complexities. Any similarity to actual names or places is coincidental, but the message I'm sharing carries weight. The afternoon light filtered through the half-drawn blinds of my study, casting long shadows across the oak desk, where I'd spent the better part of 30 years crafting stories. April in Riverdale had always been unpredictable. One day, sunshine; the next, a cold drizzle that seemed to seep into your bones. Today was somewhere in between, the kind of day that made you grateful for a roof over your head and work that kept your mind occupied. I was sorting through reader letters when the doorbell rang. Not the kind of interruption I minded usually. Fan mail had slowed since my last novel came out 2 years ago, but the occasional handwritten envelope still found its way to my door. This one, though, wasn't a letter. It was my son-in-law. Dominic Sawyer stood on my porch, with his hands shoved deep into the pockets of an expensive leather jacket I knew he couldn't afford. His jaw was set in that way I'd come to recognize over the past 3 years. The look of a man who'd already decided how a conversation would go before it started. I opened the door wider. He didn't wait for an invitation. The formalities lasted about 30 seconds. No small talk about the weather or Elodie or how business was going. He got straight to it, right there in my living room, pacing in front of the fireplace like a caged animal. $32,000. That's what he needed. Not wanted, needed. His consulting firm was going under, he said. Clients had pulled out. Bills were piling up. If he didn't come up with the money by the end of the week, everything he'd built would collapse. And Elodie, my daughter, would lose everything too. I'd heard variations of this speech before. Smaller amounts, different crises, a few thousand here for a failed investment, 5,000 there for an unexpected tax bill. I'd helped twice before against my better judgment. The money never came back. The promises always did. This time I said no. The word hung in the air between us like smoke. Dominic stopped pacing. His face went through a series of expressions I couldn't quite read. Disbelief, anger, something else I didn't want to name. Then he stepped closer. I don't remember what he said next. Something about loyalty, about family, about how a real father would help his daughter's husband. His voice got louder. My study door was still open behind me, and I could see Elodie standing at the top of the stairs, one hand gripping the railing. She'd come with him. I hadn't even known she was there. I looked at her, hoping for something. Support, maybe, or at least acknowledgement that what Dominic was asking was unreasonable. But she just stood there, frozen, her expression unreadable. That's when Dominic's hand came up. The slap wasn't theatrical. It wasn't the kind of thing you see in movies where someone winds up and puts their whole body into it. It was quick, sharp, and humiliating. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side and I tasted something metallic. For a moment, none of us moved. Then Dominic's voice cut through the silence, low and cold. He leaned in close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath. You'll regret this, he said. Not a threat exactly, a promise. I heard something crash behind me. My hand went to my face, more out of shock than pain, and I turned to see Beth's picture frame on the floor. It had been sitting on the narrow table by the door, the one piece of her I kept in the open where I could see it every day. The glass had shattered across her face, spiderwebbing over her smile. When I looked up again, Dominic was already heading for the door. Elodie hadn't moved from the stairs. Our eyes met for half a second. Hers wide, mine probably wild. And then she turned and followed him out. I heard the door slam, then the sound of a car engine starting. Then nothing. I stood there in the middle of my living room, my cheek throbbing, staring at the broken frame. Beth looked up at me through the cracks, her expression caught in that moment 2 years ago, when she didn't know the cancer had already spread. When she still thought we had time. My phone started buzzing in my pocket. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I pulled it out with shaking hands. Text messages. All from Dominic's number. I didn't read them. Not yet. I just held the phone, watching it light up over and over, each buzz a small shock against my palm. The late afternoon sun had shifted, and the room felt colder than it had an hour ago. Outside, I could hear a dog barking somewhere down the street. Normal sounds. A normal day in a normal neighborhood, except nothing felt normal anymore. I knelt down and picked up the frame, careful not to cut myself on the glass. A piece fell away, slicing a thin line across Beth's cheek in the photo. I ran my thumb over it, feeling the jagged edge. $32,000. A slap. A broken picture. My daughter standing on the stairs like a statue. The phone buzzed again. And again. I looked at the screen. 7 messages now. Then 8. I set the frame down on the table glass and stared at it. Beth's eyes looked past me toward some point I couldn't see. For the first time since she died, I didn't know what she would tell me to do. The phone kept buzzing. I kept staring, and somewhere in the back of my mind, beneath the shock and the ache in my jaw and the sick feeling in my stomach, a different kind of cold began to settle. Not anger yet. Not quite. Just the slow, creeping certainty that something had shifted. That the man who'd just walked out of my house wasn't going to stop. That the phone in my hand was only the beginning. I didn't answer. Not that night. I just stood there in the fading light, holding Beth's broken frame, listening to the phone buzz itself into silence. By the time the sun disappeared that evening, my phone had become a weapon. 47 messages. I counted them twice, though I'm not sure why the exact number mattered. Maybe because focusing on a number kept me from focusing on what the messages actually said. Most were from Dominic. Short, clipped sentences that started as apologies and devolved into something uglier. Then longer paragraphs about misunderstandings and stress and how I was overreacting. Elodie's messages arrived between his softer in tone, but somehow worse. She asked me not to tell anyone, said it would ruin everything they'd worked for, begged me to think about the family. I didn't sleep, couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing on those stairs, silent. When morning finally arrived, I knew what I needed to do. Not because I'd planned it, or because some righteous anger had crystallized overnight. I was just tired. Tired of the buzzing phone. Tired of the ache in my jaw that wouldn't fade. Tired of sitting alone in a house that felt too big and too quiet. Catherine Pierce's card was still in my desk drawer, where I'd left it 3 years ago. We'd met at a library fundraiser back when Beth was still well enough to attend those things. Catherine had been the keynote speaker, a criminal defense attorney who'd made a name for herself getting innocent people out of prison. We'd stayed in touch loosely. Birthday cards, the occasional email about book recommendations. I called her office at 8 in the morning. Her assistant put me through immediately, which should have told me something about how I sounded. Her office was downtown, tucked into one of those old brick buildings Riverdale had spent the last decade preserving. The elevator was old enough to have an accordion gate, and it creaked the whole way up to the 4th floor. Catherine met me at the door herself. No handshake, no small talk. She took one look at my face and gestured me inside. Her office smelled like old paper and strong coffee. A mahogany desk dominated the room, stacked with case files and yellow legal pads covered in her precise handwriting. She poured me a cup without asking and sat down across from me. I told her everything: the doorbell, the request for money, the refusal, what happened after. My voice stayed level the whole time, which surprised me. It felt like I was describing something that had happened to someone else. She didn't interrupt, just took notes on one of those legal pads, her pen moving quickly across the page. When I finished, she set the pen down and looked at me. "Did anyone else see this happen?" she asked. I thought of Elodie on the stairs. My daughter. She was there. Catherine's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Will she back up your account?" I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know. And that not knowing felt like its own kind of violence. "I don't think so," I said finally. She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that. "Then we need evidence. Security cameras, neighbors who might have heard something." That's when I remembered. The doorbell camera. I'd installed it the previous spring after a package went missing from the porch. Beth had teased me about it. Said I was becoming one of those paranoid suburban types who checks their phone every time a leaf blows across the yard. She wasn't wrong, but I'd kept it anyway. Catherine's expression shifted when I told her. Not quite a smile, but close. "You have the footage." On my phone. The app stores everything for 30 days. She stood up. "Show me." We crowded around her computer screen, and I pulled up the app on my phone, casting it to her monitor. The footage loaded slowly, buffering in that maddening way technology always does when you need it most. Then there it was. My front door. The timestamp in the corner reading yesterday's date. Dominic walking into frame. I'd thought watching it would be easier than living through it. I was wrong. The video had no sound, but it didn't need it. You could see everything. Dominic gesturing, me shaking my head, his hand coming up, my head snapping to the side, the picture frame falling, Elodie's silhouette at the top of the stairs, barely visible through the doorway, but there, frozen. Catherine watched it twice without saying anything. Then she leaned back in her chair. "This is assault," she said. Not a question. A statement. Clear, documented, unambiguous assault. And your son-in-law is an idiot for not checking if you had a camera. Something about the way she said it. So matter-of-fact, like she'd seen 1,000 cases just like this, made the tightness in my chest ease slightly. This wasn't just my word against his anymore. This was real, provable. "What do I do with it?" I asked. She pulled up a fresh document on her computer. "We file a police report. Attach the video. Let them decide whether to press charges." She paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "But I need you to understand something, Desmond. Once you do this, there's no taking it back. Your son-in-law will know. Your daughter will know. This becomes official." I thought about the 47 messages, about Beth's broken frame, about Elodie standing silent on those stairs. "Do it," I said. The rest of the afternoon blurred together. Paperwork. Statements. Catherine walking me through what would happen next. How the police would review the footage, likely issue a citation, possibly an arrest warrant. How Dominic would be notified. How this would become a matter of public record. I signed everything she put in front of me. My hand didn't shake. By the time we finished, the sun was starting to dip below the buildings outside her window. Catherine saved the video file to her computer, then to a thumb drive, then uploaded it to a secure cloud server. 3 backups. She was thorough. "I'll send this to the police department tonight," she said. "You should hear from them within 48 hours. I stood to leave, but she stopped me with a hand on my arm. Her grip was firm, steadying. "You did the right thing," she said. I wanted to believe her. Almost did. I drove home through evening traffic, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind oddly blank. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a long time, staring at my front door. The doorbell camera was a small black circle next to the frame, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. Such a small thing, such a huge difference. My phone buzzed. Another message from Dominic. I deleted it without reading. Then I went inside, poured myself a drink I didn't want, and waited for whatever came next. The envelope arrived 3 days after I'd sent the video to the police. Catherine's assistant dropped it off personally, a thick manila packet with the county courthouse seal embossed on the front. Inside was a copy of the criminal complaint and a summons for Dominic to appear before a judge. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. The language was formal, impersonal. The people of the state versus Dominic James Sawyer. Charges assault in the 4th degree. Possible penalties up to 90 days in jail probation, mandatory anger management classes. Catherine had offered to have the summons delivered through the sheriff's office. Standard procedure. They'd serve him at work or at home, hand him the papers, and that would be that. Clean, professional. But sitting there with the envelope in my hands, I realized I didn't want it to be clean. I wanted him to see my face when he got it. Wanted him to know that I wasn't hiding behind lawyers or deputies. This was me, choosing to hold him accountable, choosing not to let it go. Maybe that was petty, probably was, but I'd spent 3 nights sleeping poorly and 3 days ignoring messages from Elodie asking me to reconsider, to think about what this would do to her marriage, to please just let it drop. I was done being reasonable. I put the envelope in my jacket pocket and got in my car. Dominic's building was downtown, one of those new luxury developments. All glass and steel with a doorman who waved me through without question. The elevator was sleek and modern. I pressed 12 and watched the city drop away through the glass walls. Their unit was at the end of the hall. I could hear music playing inside, something jazzy and upbeat. I knocked twice. Hard. The music cut off. Footsteps. Then the door opened, and there was Dominic. He looked different than he had in my living room. Better. His hair was combed, his shirt pressed. No sign of the tension that had radiated off him when he'd demanded money. If anything, he looked almost pleased to see me. "And Desmond," he said, "I wasn't expecting you." He glanced past me, checking if I was alone. Then his eyes dropped to my jacket pocket where the corner of the envelope was visible. "Come in, let's talk," he said. I didn't move, just pulled the envelope out and held it between us. "This is for you." He took it smiling, though the smile had gotten tighter. His fingers worked at the seal, tearing it open with eagerness. He thought I'd brought him a check, actually believed I'd come here to pay him off. The summons slid out into his hand. I watched his face as he read it. Watched the confusion first, then the comprehension, then the color draining from his skin. "What is this?" His voice had gone very quiet. "It's a court summons," I said. "For assault. You're being charged." He looked up at me, and for a second I saw fear. Then it was gone, replaced by something uglier. "You're serious," he said. Not a question, an accusation. "You're actually doing this." "Yes." His hands crumpled the paper. "Over nothing. Over a misunderstanding. You're going to drag us into court over—" "It's on camera," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. Cold. Sharp. Satisfaction curling through my chest as his face went slack. I shouldn't have said it. Knew it the instant the words left my mouth. Catherine had told me explicitly not to tip our hand, not to let him know about the footage until discovery. But standing there in his doorway, watching him try to minimize what he'd done, I wanted him to know. The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled taut. Then Dominic's face twisted into something I barely recognized. He took a step forward, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and cloying. "Did it take a slap to wake you up?" His voice was low, venomous. "At your age, you should know better. Just hand over the money quietly and save yourself the embarrassment." "But no, you had to make this difficult." He kept talking, but I'd already turned away, started walking back toward the elevator. My hands were shaking now, adrenaline flooding my system. Behind me, Dominic's voice rose. Threats about lawyers. Something about Elodie. A string of words I didn't want to parse. The elevator doors opened, someone getting off on this floor. An older woman with a small dog who took one look at Dominic shouting in his doorway and hurried past with her eyes down. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the garage. The doors slid shut, cutting off whatever Dominic was saying mid-sentence. The descent felt longer than the climb. I leaned against the glass wall and watched the floors tick by, trying to steady my breathing. It's on camera. Why had I said that? What did I think would happen? All I'd done was give him time to prepare. Time to lawyer up, maybe. Time to come up with some counter-narrative. Catherine was going to be furious when I told her. The parking garage was dim and cool. I found my car and sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. My hands were still trembling slightly, and I gripped the steering wheel until they steadied. I'd wanted to see his face when he got the summons. Mission accomplished. But now he knew about the camera. Knew I had evidence. And whatever slim chance there'd been of him taking this quietly had just evaporated. I started the car and pulled out into traffic. The drive home felt longer than usual, every stoplight an opportunity for my mind to replay the conversation. The look on his face when he saw the summons. The way his voice had dropped when I mentioned the camera. My own stupid satisfaction at catching him off guard. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the satisfaction had curdled into something else. Regret, maybe. Or just exhaustion. My phone buzzed. A text from Catherine, summons delivered. I typed back, yes. Didn't mention the rest. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I got out of the car and went inside, closing the door behind me with more force than necessary. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I stood in the entryway, looking at the spot where Beth's frame used to sit, and wondered what she would say about what I'd just done. Probably that I was an idiot. Probably that I'd let my ego get in the way of strategy. She'd be right. Elodie's text came through on a Tuesday morning, 10 days after I'd handed Dominic the summons. Short and formal, like she was messaging a colleague instead of her father. And can we meet today if possible? The coffee place on Maple. No greeting, no explanation. Just an ask that felt more like a demand. I almost said no. Almost typed back that if she wanted to talk, she could come to the house, sit in the living room where her husband had struck me, and we could have an honest conversation there. But something in the clipped tone made me hesitate. I texted back 2 o'clock. The coffee shop was one of those generic places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs, and a chalkboard menu listing drinks with names I didn't understand. I ordered plain black coffee and took a table by the window. Elodie arrived 15 minutes late. When she finally pushed through the door, I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back in a way that made her look older than 36. She didn't order anything. Just sat down across from me and folded her hands on the table. "Thanks for coming," she said, then took a breath. "Dad, you have to drop this. The charges, the whole thing. It's destroying us." Not an apology. Not even an acknowledgement of what Dominic had done. Just straight to asking me to make it go away. "But he hit me," I said quietly. In my own home. It was a mistake. He was stressed, he wasn't thinking. He asked me for $32,000. When I said no, he struck me. Those are facts, Elodie. Her eyes welled up, and I felt something twist in my chest. These weren't tears of grief or pain. They were calculated, strategic. "You're ruining his life," she said, voice cracking. "He's already lost clients because of the rumors. People are talking. His reputation, our reputation, is being destroyed. For what, your pride?" My pride," I repeated. The word tasted bitter. What else could it be? He made a mistake. A single moment of bad judgment. And you're turning it into this vendetta. She leaned forward. We're family. Family forgives. Family moves on. I thought about the 47 messages the night it happened. Thought about her standing on those stairs silent. Thought about how she hadn't called once in 10 days just to ask if I was okay. "Where were you?" I asked. She blinked. "What?" When he hit me. "You were right there, on the stairs. And you didn't say a word." Something flickered across her face. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. "You knew enough to leave with him. Knew enough to text me that night telling me to keep quiet." I was trying to protect our family." "No." The word came out harder than I intended. "You were trying to protect him. There's a difference." Her expression hardened. The tears dried up like someone had flipped a switch. "So that's it. You're really going through with this?" "Yes." She stood up so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. "Fine. But don't expect me to be there when this all falls apart. Don't expect me to pick up the pieces when you realize what you've done." She turned and walked out. Didn't look back. Through the window, I watched her get into Dominic's car and pull away too fast, tires squealing slightly on the turn. I sat there for a long time after she left, my coffee going cold. The messages started that evening. All Dominic. Longer than before. More aggressive. He'd pivoted from apologies to threats, talking about defamation and harassment. How I was the one who'd crossed a line. How his lawyers would tear apart my little video. I stopped reading after the 5th one. Around 8, Gerald called. My literary agent. We'd worked together for almost 20 years. His voice on the phone was careful. Too careful. "Desmond, hey. I've been hearing some things. Online mostly. Some posts on a local forum. About you and your son-in-law." My stomach dropped. "What kind of posts?" "Nothing specific. Just people talking. Saying there's a dispute. That you're making accusations." A pause. "Is it true? Did something happen?" "Yes, he assaulted me. I have it on video. I've filed charges." Silence. Long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. "Listen, I'm not doubting you. But you know how this looks, right? A father-in-law going after his daughter's husband. People are going to assume it's family drama. There is more to the story." He hit me. "I believe you," Gerald said unconvincingly. "I just think you need to be careful. Consider whether this is worth the fallout. The fallout. As if I was the one who'd created this mess." We ended the call shortly after with hollow goodbyes. I poured myself a bourbon. Then another. Sat in my study with the lights off. Beth's picture frame sat on my desk, the glass replaced. She smiled out at me from 5 years ago. I must have dozed off in the chair because when I woke up, weak morning light was filtering through the blinds. My neck was stiff. I reached for my phone to check the time. 7:30, Wednesday morning. 3 new emails. 2 were spam. The third was from an address I didn't recognize, owen.fletcher.1981@gmail.com. The subject line was blank. The message was only 2 sentences. Dominic Sawyer owes me $65,000 from 3 years ago. I have proof. Do you want to talk? I read it twice, then a third time. Owen Fletcher. Nobody I knew. Nobody I'd ever heard of. But he knew Dominic, and Dominic owed him money. $65,000. I thought about the $32,000 Dominic had asked me for. Thought about Elodie's insistence that he was just stressed. Thought about the expensive car and the luxury condo. This wasn't a rough patch. This was a pattern. I looked at Beth's picture. She was giving me that look she used to give when I was being stubborn, eyebrows raised, mouth pressed thin. The look that said, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" I picked up the phone and started typing a response to Owen Fletcher. "Yes, let's talk." I arrived at the restaurant 20 minutes early, a habit Beth used to tease me about. The place was called The Crossroads, one of those family diners tucked into a strip mall on the edge of town. Red vinyl booths, laminated menus, a waitress who called everyone honey. The kind of place where nobody would look twice at two men having a serious conversation. I ordered coffee and watched the parking lot through the window. Owen Fletcher pulled up in a Honda Accord that had seen better days. I recognized him from his email signature, sandy hair going gray at the temples, wire-rimmed glasses, the look of someone who'd once been confident and was still trying to remember how that felt. When he slid into the booth across from me, the first thing I noticed was the scar. Thin white line along his jaw, starting just below his chin and running back toward his ear. Desmond. He extended his hand. His grip was firm, but his palm was damp. Owen, thanks for meeting me. No, thank you. I wasn't sure you'd respond to my email. But when I saw your name in the police report, it's public record now, I figured maybe you needed to know what you're dealing with. He pulled a manila folder from his messenger bag and set it on the table. Dominic and I were business partners, or at least that's what I thought we were. Back in 2021, he pitched me on a tech startup logistics software for small businesses. Said he had connections with venture capital firms, that we just needed seed money to get a prototype built. He opened the folder. Inside were printouts, emails, contracts, bank statements, all meticulously organized with colored tabs. I put in $65,000, everything I had in savings. 6 months in, I started asking questions. Where was the prototype? When were we meeting with the VCs? He kept making excuses. Owen paused. Then one day I showed up at the address he'd given me for our office. Know what I found? A UPS store. One of those mailbox rental places. There was no office. No employees. No prototype. He pulled out a bank statement, pointed to a highlighted line. A transfer for $65,000 to an LLC called Sawyer Consulting Group. I confronted him. Met him at a bar downtown. Told him I wanted my money back or I was going to the police. Owen touched the scar on his chin, a reflexive gesture. He didn't take it well. He hit you, I said quietly. Struck me, yeah, right there in the parking lot. I went down, hit my head on the curb, needed stitches. He pulled out his phone, showed me a photo from an emergency room, his face swollen and bruised, blood on his collar. I filed a police report. Was planning to file a civil suit too. What happened? Your daughter called me. The words landed like a punch. I'm sorry, I thought you should know. She called me 2 days after I filed the report. Said her husband had made a mistake, that he was under a lot of stress, that I was blowing things out of proportion. She asked me to drop it. Said if I pursued legal action, it would ruin their lives. She cried on the phone. Told me they were trying to start a family. He took a sip of his coffee. I almost believed her, but then my lawyer got a threatening letter from Dominic's attorney, saying that if I didn't withdraw the complaint, they'd counter-sue for defamation. The legal fees alone would have bankrupted me. So I dropped it. Ate the loss. I stared at the documents spread across the table. Elodie hadn't just stood by while Dominic operated. She'd actively helped him, called his victims, pressured them to back down. You're sure it was her? I'm positive. She introduced herself as Elodie Sawyer. Said she was calling because she loved her husband and wanted to fix things. Owen leaned forward. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what you're up against. This isn't just Dominic. It's both of them. They work together. The diner suddenly felt too small, too bright. Do you think there are others? I asked. Owen nodded slowly. I'd bet on it. Guys like Dominic don't just run one scam. They're serial. They find a mark, bleed them dry, move on to the next one. I thought about the $32,000 Dominic had asked me for. Thought about the expensive condo and designer clothes. Beth had a brother, I heard myself say. Robert. I remember him mentioning money troubles a while back. And there was a cousin, Margaret Walsh. Lives in Arizona. Owen pulled out a pen. Do you have contact information? I can find it. He slid a business card across the table. Reach out to them. See if Dominic ever approached them. If he did, and if they'll talk, we might be able to establish a pattern. Make it harder for him to claim this is all just misunderstandings and family drama. We talked for another half hour. When we finally stood to leave, he gripped my shoulder. Be careful. Dominic's dangerous when he's cornered. And your daughter, I don't know what hold he has over her, but she's in deep. You need to be ready for that. I drove home through streets that felt unfamiliar. Kept replaying Owen's words. Your daughter called me. She cried on the phone. They worked together. Back in my study, I pulled up my old address book, the physical one Beth had insisted on keeping. Found Robert's email address in her handwriting. Found Margaret's too, along with a note. Sends lovely cards every year. Remember to reciprocate. I wondered what Beth would say if she knew what Elodie had become. Whether she'd seen hints of it that I'd missed. I opened my laptop and started typing. The email to Robert was straightforward. Brief explanation of what had happened with Dominic, mention of the assault charge, a carefully worded question about whether Dominic had ever approached him about money or business opportunities. The one to Margaret was similar but gentler. I hadn't spoken to her since Beth's funeral. I hit send on both and sat back in my chair. Through the window, I could see my neighbor trimming his hedges. His wife was on the porch reading. Ordinary Saturday afternoon scenes, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. My daughter wasn't who I thought she was. Maybe never had been. And somewhere out there were other people like Owen who'd trusted Dominic and paid for it. People Elodie had helped him hurt. I thought about her tears in the coffee shop. The calculated performance of it all. She hadn't been protecting our family. She'd been protecting their operation. My phone buzzed. A reply from Robert already. Call me. We need to talk. I stared at those 5 words for a long time before I picked up the phone. Margaret's call came on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks after Dominic had struck me. Her voice was thin and careful, the way people sound when they're not sure how a conversation will go. Desmond, it's Margaret Walsh, Beth's cousin. I got your email. I'd almost forgotten I'd sent it. So much had happened since Owen's scarred jaw, Elodie's calculated tears, Robert's terse reply. Margaret, thank you for calling. I wish I was calling with better news. You asked if Dominic ever approached me about money. The answer is yes. $48,000. I lost every cent. The number hit me like a physical thing. Another victim. Another carefully constructed lie. Can we meet? I know you're in Arizona, but I need to hear this in person. I need to see the documentation. She hesitated. That's a long drive, Desmond. I'll leave tonight. And I did. The interstate stretched out before me, flanked by landscape that grew emptier the further south I drove. I left Riverdale just after sunset, watched the familiar green of the Pacific Northwest give way to high desert scrub, then to Arizona's endless brown expanse. 10 hours. I stopped once at a truck stop past the Oregon border. Bought coffee that tasted like it had been sitting on the burner since morning. Back on the road, the night closed in. No moon. Just the tunnel of my headlights and occasional sweep of oncoming traffic. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, crossing into Arizona, I felt it settle into my chest. Not anger anymore. Something colder, more deliberate. A kind of clarity that comes when you've driven long enough through darkness that your mind strips away everything except what matters. Dominic hadn't just hurt me. He'd built a system, a method. And somewhere in that system was Beth. I reached Margaret's place, mid-morning desert sun, already climbing toward brutal. She lived in one of those retirement communities, neat rows of tan stucco bungalows. She answered the door before I'd finished knocking. 70, maybe. Gray hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain. Beth's eyes, I realized with a jolt. The same shade of hazel. You look exhausted, she said. Come in. I'll make tea. Her living room was small and tidy, photos on every surface, and there on the mantel a picture of Beth from years ago, some family reunion I'd missed. Margaret brought tea in delicate cups, sat across from me and pulled out a cardboard file box. I kept everything, she said. My daughter told me I was being paranoid, that I should just let it go. But I couldn't. The box was full of documents, contracts, emails, bank statements, all organized with meticulous care. Dominic came to me in 2022, said he was a financial consultant, had connections in the medical device industry. There was a company developing monitoring equipment for diabetes patients about to go public. If I invested before the IPO, I'd triple my money within a year. She pulled out a prospectus that looked professional, glossy paper charts projections. A company called Meditech Solutions. He showed me testimonials from other investors. Said Beth had recommended me specifically, that she'd told him I was smart with money and would recognize a good opportunity. Beth recommended you? My voice came out rough. That's what he said. And I believed him because Beth was family. Because why would her son-in-law lie? I gave him $48,000. Everything I had in a CD that had just matured. Money my husband left me. 6 months later, when I tried to check on the investment, the company didn't exist. Never had. The prospectus was fake. The testimonials were fake. The whole thing was smoke. My phone rang. Robert Brennan. I put it on speaker. Desmond, got your email. And yeah, Dominic got me too. $38,000. Year ago. Said he was expanding, his consulting firm needed capital. Showed me a business plan, projected revenues, all of it fake. Margaret looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. He never paid you back? I asked. Not a cent. When I pressed him, he said the expansion had hit snags. Then he stopped returning my calls. I thought about suing, but he's married to your daughter. I didn't want to make things harder for Elodie. For you. Robert, I'm at Margaret's house. She lost $48,000, and there are 2 others I know about. Maybe more. Silence. Then, Jesus, how many people has he done this to? Margaret cleared her throat. There's something else you should know. About Beth. The room seemed to tilt. Beth gave Dominic money too. I didn't know about it until after she passed. Robert, you were settling her estate. Did you find any records of a large withdrawal, $40,000, maybe $50,000? Through the phone, Robert's breathing went shallow. There was something. I remember seeing a transfer that seemed odd. I asked Dominic about it at the funeral. He said Beth had loaned it to him for the business, that he'd pay it back once things stabilized. I believed him. The tea in my cup had gone cold. I set it down carefully. She never told me, I said. She was sick, going through treatment, and she never said anything. She probably didn't want to worry you, Margaret said gently. Beth always put everyone else first, even when she shouldn't have. The conversation with Robert ended shortly after, but I barely heard it. Just sat in Margaret's living room, surrounded by evidence of betrayal, staring at Beth's face in that photograph. She'd been dying, known she was dying, and Dominic had taken money from her anyway. I left as the afternoon heat began to fade. Margaret walked me to the door and gripped my arm with surprising strength. Make him pay for this, she said. For all of us. For Beth especially. I will. The drive back was longer. Past midnight, somewhere in the empty stretch between nowhere and home, I pulled off at a rest stop, got out of the car, and stood in the desert dark. Above me, stars scattered across the sky in numbers you never saw in the city. Beth should have been here to see this, should have had more time. Instead, she'd spent her final months being lied to by the man who'd married her daughter. The fury in my chest wasn't hot anymore, wasn't even cold. It was absolute zero. The kind of cold that burned. I got back in the car and drove through the night toward home. toward making sure Dominic Sawyer paid for every lie, every dollar, every person he'd hurt, especially Beth. Before I reveal what Robert sent me, what I found buried in Beth's belongings, I want to see if you're still listening. Comment "truth" below so I know you're ready for this. Because once I say it out loud, there's no taking it back. Just so you know, the story ahead blends some fictionalized layers to capture the emotional weight. If you'd prefer to skip what's coming, this is your moment to click away. But if you want to understand how deep the betrayal went, don't move. The package from Robert arrived on a Thursday afternoon, 2 days after I'd returned from Arizona. I found it waiting on my porch, a small box held together with too much packing tape, Robert's handwriting on the label in careful block letters. No note inside. Just a manila envelope stuffed with papers and a smaller cardboard box that rattled slightly when I shook it. I carried everything into my study and closed the door, though there was no one else in the house to disturb. The manila envelope held bank statements, Beth's accounts from the last year of her life. I'd gone through her finances after she died, of course, settled everything with Robert's help, but I hadn't looked closely. Every number had felt like a reminder of her absence. Now I spread the statements across my desk and forced myself to see them differently. Not as grief, as evidence. January 2023, 4 months before she died. There it was. A single transfer. $22,000 from her personal savings account to an external account listed as DS Financial Consulting, LLC. DS Dominic Sawyer. The date stamp read January 18th. I pulled up my calendar. I'd been at a book signing that day, 2 hours away. Beth had insisted I go, said she felt fine. I'd left her alone for 6 hours. 6 hours was all Dominic had needed. The cardboard box contained personal effects Robert had packed up from Beth's bedside table. Her reading glasses. A paperback mystery with a bookmark still in it. And underneath it all, a small leather journal I didn't recognize. I opened it carefully. Beth's handwriting filled the pages. Not a diary exactly. More like notes to herself. Thoughts about treatment options. Lists of medications. The last few pages were dated January through March of 2023. I forced myself to read. January 15th. Dominic came by this afternoon. Desmond was at his signing. Dee seemed upset, said his mother back in Philadelphia needed emergency surgery. Insurance won't cover it all. He asked if we could help. $22,000. Such a large amount. But if it's his mother, if it's life or death, how can I say no? Elodie would want me to help. January 18th. Transferred the money today. Dominic sent the account information. Called it a business account because it's easier for transfers. He promised to pay it back once his mother recovers. I didn't tell Desmond yet. Don't want him to worry. February 3rd. Got an email from Dominic. His mother is doing well, recovering nicely. He's so grateful. Says we saved her life. That feels good. To help. To still be useful even when I feel so useless. March 12th. Haven't heard from Dominic about repayment yet. Maybe I should ask, but it seems rude. Medical recovery takes time. I'll wait. The next entries were shorter, more scattered. Beth's handwriting getting shakier as the illness progressed. Nothing more about the money. Just notes about pain levels and doctor appointments. I closed the journal and set it down carefully. My hands were shaking. There was something else in the box. A printed email. Beth had been old-fashioned that way, printing important things out. From Dominic Sawyer to Beth Clark. Date January 20th, 2023. Subject: thank you. Dear Mom Beth, I can't express how grateful we are for your generosity. The surgery went well, and the doctors say my mother should make a full recovery. You quite literally saved her life. When I told her it was you who helped, she cried. We'll pay you back as soon as we're able. With love and gratitude, Dominic. I read it 3 times. Then I searched for Dominic's mother's name. Found his parents listed on a genealogy site, father deceased 10 years ago, mother living in a nursing home in New Jersey. Still alive. No surgery, no emergency, no medical crisis at all. The email was a fabrication. The whole story was a lie. Dominic had taken $22,000 from my dying wife by inventing a crisis that didn't exist. Had called her Mom Beth, while Beth lay in bed, trying to decide if she had the strength to eat breakfast. I walked to the window. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into evening. Someone was grilling. I could smell charcoal smoke. A kid rode past on a bicycle. The normalcy of it felt obscene. Beth had died, believing she'd helped save someone's mother. Had spent her last months thinking she'd done something good, something meaningful, and Elodie. Beth had written, Elodie would want me to help, our daughter, who'd stood on those stairs and watched her husband strike me, who'd called Owen Fletcher and pressured him to drop his complaint. Beth had given Dominic that money, thinking it would help her daughter's family, thinking she was doing what a good mother would do. I walked back to the desk and picked up the bank statement. Looked at the other names I'd written on a notepad. Owen Fletcher, $65,000. Margaret Walsh, $48,000. Robert Brennan, $38,000. Beth Clark, $22,000. And then there was me. The $28,000 I'd given to Dominic and Elodie over the years, always with promises of repayment that never materialized. Total $201,000. $201,000. That's what Dominic Sawyer had stolen. Not from strangers. From his wife's family and people who trusted him. I sat down heavily. Beth's journal was still open to that entry about Dominic's mother. Her handwriting looked so hopeful. That feels good. To help. To still be useful. She'd wanted to feel useful. And he'd used that. The evening darkened into night. I didn't turn on any lights. Just sat in my study with Beth's papers spread around me like evidence at a crime scene. Dominic hadn't just stolen money. He'd stolen Beth's peace. Her final months. The comfort of believing she'd helped someone. Tomorrow I would call Catherine. Would hand over every piece of evidence. Would make sure Dominic's theft from Beth became part of the official record. But tonight I just sat in the dark with my wife's journal and let myself feel the full weight of what he'd done. Not just to me, to her, to all of us. Nina Castellano's call came on a Friday morning, a week after I'd sat in my study with Beth's journal. Her voice on the phone was direct, professional. Mr. Clark, my name is Nina Castellano. I'm an investigative reporter with the Riverdale Tribune. Owen Fletcher gave me your contact information. He said you might have a story I should hear. I'd been expecting this. Catherine had mentioned that cases like these sometimes benefited from media attention, public pressure, making it harder for the defendant to control the narrative. How soon can you be here? I asked. She arrived 2 hours later. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, carrying a messenger bag that looked like it had been through a war. She declined my offer of coffee, pulled out a digital recorder, and got straight to business. Owen told me about the $65,000, said there might be others. How many are we talking about? I'd organized everything the night before. The doorbell camera footage, Owen's contracts, Margaret's IPO documents, Robert's loan agreement, Beth's bank statement with that single damning transfer, her journal, the fake email from Dominic about his mother's surgery. Nina worked methodically through each piece, taking notes, asking clarifying questions, occasionally photographing documents with her phone. Now, and your daughter? She asked, not looking up from Beth's journal. Where does she fit in all this? The question I'd been dreading. She's his wife, and based on what Owen told me, she's been helping him, calling victims, pressuring them to drop complaints. Nina's pen paused. You're aware that implicates her as an accessory? Yes. That can't be easy. None of this is easy. We talked for almost 3 hours. Nina promised to verify what she could independently, said she'd need about a week to write a comprehensive piece. Maybe two. After she left, I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt restless, agitated, like I'd handed off something that should have stayed mine to control. I kept thinking about Beth's journal, that line that feels good, to help, to still be useful. She'd wanted to believe she was doing something meaningful, and Dominic had taken that away from her. The anger came flooding back. Not the cold, calculated kind. Something hotter, more urgent, the kind that demanded immediate action instead of waiting for a journalist to fact-check and a newspaper to print something 2 weeks from now. I opened my laptop, logged into the social media account I barely used. I started typing. It poured out of me. Everything. The assault, the camera footage, the pattern of victims, Owen's scar and Margaret's life savings and Robert's trust, Beth's journal entries, and the fake email and the $22,000 stolen from a dying woman who just wanted to help. I named Dominic. Full name. Included that he was a financial advisor, that he operated under DS Financial Consulting, that he'd been doing this for years. I wrote about Elodie too. Not everything. Just that she was my daughter, that she'd stood by while her husband struck me, that I didn't know anymore who she'd become. The post was long. I didn't edit, didn't pause to reconsider. Just typed until there was nothing left to say, then hit share. The response was immediate. Within an hour, the post had been shared 30 times. Within 2 hours, 100. Comments poured in expressions of outrage, offers of support, people sharing their own stories of being scammed. Someone found Dominic's business website and left a review. Someone else suggested reporting him to the state regulatory board. It felt good, like Beth's story was being heard. Then my phone rang. Catherine. Tell me you didn't just post what I think you posted on social media. Her voice had controlled fury. Desmond, what were you thinking? You just handed Dominic's lawyers a gift-wrapped defense strategy. Every word of that post can now be used to argue that you're orchestrating a harassment campaign. Dominic can argue that any jury pool has been tainted. He can move for a change of venue. He can sue you for defamation. As if on cue, my email notification dinged. A message from an address I didn't recognize, subject line, cease and desist, urgent. I opened it. The email was from a law firm downtown. 3 paragraphs of legal language that boiled down to this: take down the post within 48 hours and issue a public apology, or face a civil lawsuit for defamation seeking damages of $500,000. Desmond, are you listening to me? They're threatening to sue me for $500,000. Silence. Then a long exhale. Of course they are. It's a pressure tactic. They'll claim you damaged his business reputation. It might not hold up in court, but defending against it will cost you tens of thousands in legal fees at minimum. I stared at the email, at the 48-hour deadline. I can't take it down, I heard myself say. Desmond, it's already been shared hundreds of times. Screenshots exist. Taking it down now doesn't unring the bell. And more importantly, I looked at Beth's photo on the shelf. I meant every word. It's all true. What? That's not the standard for defamation, Catherine said, gentler now. The standard is whether you can prove it's true in court. And you just gave Dominic's team advance notice of every piece of evidence we have. So I made a mistake. Yes, you did. Just like you made a mistake telling Dominic about the camera footage. You let your emotions override your strategic thinking, and now we're dealing with the consequences. She was right. I'd done exactly what I'd done before, acted on impulse, on anger, on the need to do something right now, instead of waiting for the proper process. What do? I asked. Nothing. Don't respond to the cease and desist. Don't take down the post. Don't engage with anyone commenting. I'll draft a response to his lawyers. But Desmond, no more public statements. Not on social media, not to friends, not to anyone except Nina if she has follow-up questions. Can you do that? Yes, I'm serious. One more impulsive move and this case gets significantly harder to win. After we hung up, I sat with my laptop open to the post. It was still spreading. The comment count had passed 500. People were tagging news outlets demanding accountability. Everything I'd wanted, and everything I shouldn't have done. I closed the laptop and looked at the cease and desist email again. 48 hours to comply or face a lawsuit. The anger had burned down to ash. What remained was exhaustion, and the growing certainty that no matter how many right moves I made, I'd always be one step behind. My phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another comment. I turned the phone face down and sat in the silence, wondering what Beth would say about what I'd just done. Probably the same thing Catherine had said. Probably that I'd let my emotions override my judgment, again. The article went live on a Tuesday morning, a week after my impulsive social media post. I found it because my phone started buzzing before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee, a text from Owen, with just a link and 3 words, "She did it." The headline sat at the top of the Riverdale Tribune's homepage. The perfect son-in-law, a financial advisor's web of family betrayal. Below it, Nina Castellanos' byline. Below that, a photo of Dominic, professional headshot, confident smile, expensive suit. The kind of image that made you want to trust him with your money. I read the article standing in my kitchen, coffee going cold on the counter. Nina had done exactly what she'd promised. The piece was exhaustive, methodical. She'd interviewed Owen, Margaret, and Robert, had verified the bank transfers, the fake contracts, the shell companies, had obtained comment from the State Financial Regulatory Board, confirming they'd received multiple complaints about DS Financial Consulting over the past 3 years. She'd written about Beth. A paragraph about the journal entry, the fake email about Dominic's mother's surgery, the $22,000 transferred 4 months before she died. Nina had even tracked down records showing Dominic's mother was alive and well in a New Jersey nursing home with no history of emergency surgery. The article didn't editorialize, didn't need to, just laid out the facts in clean, devastating prose. $200,000, 5 victims, a pattern spanning 3 years. My phone buzzed again. Then again. Notifications piling up as the article began to spread. Within an hour, it had jumped to regional news aggregators. By noon, a cable news website had picked it up. The comments section filled with outrage, expressions of support, calls for prosecution, demands that Dominic's professional license be revoked. For about 4 hours, I let myself believe that maybe I'd done the right thing, that the truth was finally out there in a way that couldn't be dismissed. Then Dominic's lawyers filed their response. The notification came through on the Tribune's website, an update appended to Nina's article. Sawyer's attorney had filed a defamation lawsuit seeking $500,000 in damages against both me and the Tribune. Additionally, they'd filed a motion to delay the criminal trial, arguing that extensive media coverage had made it impossible for him to receive a fair trial. I called Catherine. "I saw," she said. "The motion to delay is bullshit. The judge will see through it. But there's something else you should know. The motion includes a request to subpoena your daughter as a witness, claims she can testify that you've been orchestrating a harassment campaign against him." The kitchen suddenly felt too small. Elodie wouldn't. She? I didn't have an answer. The email from Elodie arrived that afternoon. Subject line, "Are you happy now? Dad, I was placed on administrative leave today, pending investigation into my association with an ongoing fraud case." Those were my supervisor's exact words. "Do you have any idea what you've done? 7 years I've worked at that agency, and now I'm suspended because my father decided to wage a public war against my husband. You couldn't just let it go, couldn't handle it privately, had to make it a spectacle, had to ruin everything we've worked for. I hope it was worth it. Don't contact me again. E." I sat with the email open on my screen for a long time. Read it over and over, looking for some hint of the daughter I'd raised, That girl wouldn't have written this email. Wouldn't have reduced 7 years of work to everything we've worked for. Wouldn't have ignored every single victim in Nina's article to focus only on her own inconvenience. But maybe this was who she'd always been, and I'd just been too blind to see it. My phone buzzed. Not an email this time. A text message. Unknown number. Just an image, no words. I opened it. Dominic and Elodie. Selfie taken somewhere with good lighting. Both of them smiling. Not stressed, not worried, just casual. Dominic had his arm around Elodie's shoulders. She was leaning into him. The caption below the photo, "Family stays together." I stared at it until the screen went dark. Family stays together. That's what Dominic wanted me to see. Not just that Elodie had chosen him, but that she was happy about it. That they were united. That all of this was something they were weathering together as a team. And I was on the outside. I called Catherine back. "I need you to investigate Elodie's role in the fraud," I said. Owen told me she called him, pressured him to drop his complaint. She's not just standing by Dominic. She's part of it. Desmond, I understand you're upset. I'm not upset. I'm clear. For the first time in months, I'm actually seeing clearly. My daughter isn't a passive victim here. She's an active participant. Silence. Then, "I'll talk to the prosecutor. But the evidence against Elodie is thin. Owen's testimony about a phone call 3 years ago. Maybe some circumstantial stuff, but nothing concrete. No emails, no financial transactions in her name. So she gets away with it." Catherine's voice softened. "She's your daughter. If we go after her criminally and succeed, she could face jail time, lose her professional license, have a felony record. Is that really what you want?" I looked at the photo still open on my phone. At Elodie smiling next to the man who'd struck me, who'd stolen from my dying wife. "Family stays together." "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know what I want anymore. Then maybe sit with that for a while. Let me handle the motion to delay. Let the prosecutor handle the criminal case. And you take care of yourself. Because this is only going to get harder." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and pulled up Nina's article again. Read through the comments. Hundreds of them. Strangers calling for justice. But none of them were my daughter. None of them had sent me an email asking if I was happy now. None of them had posed for a smiling selfie captioned like a taunt. I closed the laptop and looked around my kitchen. The house was so quiet. Had been quiet for 2 years since Beth died. But this was a different kind of quiet. The kind that came from knowing no one was coming back. "Family stays together." "Yeah, just not mine." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning 4 days after Dominic had sent me that photo. I hadn't slept well since. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that image, Elodie leaning into him, both of them smiling. Catherine met me in the courthouse lobby. She looked tired but professional. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I'm here." "That's something." She adjusted her briefcase. "Listen, this hearing is mostly procedural. The judge will review the evidence, hear arguments about the motion to delay, and set a trial date if he denies it, which he will. The video evidence is too solid. Just stay calm, don't react to anything, and let me handle the talking." I nodded. Felt like I'd been nodding for weeks now. Going through motions I didn't fully understand, trusting people to guide me through a process that felt less like justice and more like endurance. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, an American flag in the corner. Catherine led me to a table on the left. The prosecutor, Sarah Carter, was already there organizing files. Dominic and Gregory Hunt sat at the table on the right. Dominic wore a dark suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. His expression was neutral. Calm. I forced myself not to look at him. Focused on the empty judge's bench. The door opened behind us. I heard footsteps turned automatically. Elodie. She stood in the doorway for a moment, scanning the room. When her eyes met mine, something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or discomfort. But she didn't acknowledge me. just moved to the public seating and sat down in the back row. She was wearing a black blouse. Simple. Professional. Her hair was pulled back. No makeup. She looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Didn't expect her to show up, Catherine murmured. Neither did I. Judge Patricia Moreno entered. Everyone stood. She gestured for us to sit and got straight to business, reviewing the case file. The hearing was exactly as Catherine had described. Procedural. Almost boring. Gregory Hunt argued that the media coverage, both my social media post and Nina's article, had created a prejudicial environment, that his client couldn't receive a fair trial, that the case should be delayed until the defamation lawsuit was resolved. Sarah Carter countered with the video evidence, played it on the courtroom monitor. There it was again, Dominic in my living room, my head snapping to the side, Beth's picture frame falling. The audio was muted, but the violence was clear. Judge Moreno watched it twice. Then she denied the motion to delay. Adi, the evidence is unambiguous, she said, her voice flat and professional. The defendant is charged with assault. The video documentation removes any reasonable doubt about whether the alleged incident occurred. Media coverage doesn't change that. Trial is set for 4 weeks from today, July 18th. Both parties will receive formal notice. July 18th, 4 weeks away. Gregory Hunt tried to argue further, but Judge Moreno cut him off. Motion denied. We're adjourned. The gavel came down. Everyone stood. The whole thing had taken maybe 30 minutes. I watched Dominic and Gregory Hunt leave through a side door, heads together in conversation. Then I looked back toward the public seating. Elodie was still there. She hadn't stood when the judge left, just sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. That's when I noticed it. Her right hand, resting against her stomach. Not obviously, not dramatically, just there. A small gesture that might have meant nothing, but it looked protective. We should go, Catherine said, gathering her files. I followed her out, glancing back once. Elodie was still sitting there, alone in that empty courtroom, hand still on her stomach, expression unreadable. The house felt emptier than usual when I got home. 4 weeks, 28 days. Then a trial that would determine what exactly, whether Dominic went to jail for 90 days, whether he paid a fine. Beth's photo was still on the shelf where I'd placed it after replacing the broken glass. I picked it up, ran my thumb over the frame's edge. She'd have known what to do. I learned later, much later, after everything had ended, and Elodie finally told me what happened that afternoon. She'd gone to a doctor's appointment, had been feeling off for weeks, tired, nauseous in the mornings. She'd suspected, but hadn't wanted to believe it. Not now. Not in the middle of all this. The doctor confirmed it. 8 weeks pregnant. Conceived in late April or early May, before Dominic had struck me, before everything had fallen apart. She'd sat in that doctor's office for a long time, staring at the ultrasound photo, a grainy black and white image. 8 weeks. Barely anything yet. But something. She'd felt 2 things simultaneously. Joy because she'd wanted children, had always wanted to be a mother. And terror because of the man she'd have to tell. That evening, she'd gone home to the loft. Dominic had been in a good mood. The preliminary hearing hadn't gone his way, but Gregory Hunt was confident about the trial. Elodie had waited until after dinner, until Dominic was relaxed, scrolling through his phone. Then she'd told him, "I'm pregnant." The silence lasted maybe 5 seconds. Then Dominic had stood up. His expression had gone cold, in a way she'd never seen before. This is not the time for a baby. Not congratulations. Not questions. Just a flat statement of rejection. She'd tried to explain that she hadn't planned it, that it was a surprise, that they could figure it out. He'd cut her off. We're in the middle of a lawsuit. Multiple lawsuits. I might be going to trial. And you think this is a good time to have a child? His voice had gotten louder. She'd stepped back. He'd slammed his hand down on the counter hard enough that she flinched. "Figure it out," he'd said. Then he'd grabbed his jacket and left. She'd stood in that kitchen with one hand on her stomach and the other gripping the counter. And for the first time since she'd married him, she'd let herself think, what if I made a mistake? Not about the pregnancy, about everything else. But I didn't know any of that then. All I knew was that I had 28 days until a trial, that my house was too quiet, and Beth's photo was collecting dust, and somewhere across town, my daughter was living a life I couldn't access anymore. I pulled out my calendar, marked July 18th with a red X. 28 days. I'd waited this long. I could wait a little longer. 3 weeks before the trial, I fell into a routine that felt less like living and more like treading water. Wake up. Coffee. Stare at the calendar. Count the days again. Check my phone for messages that never came. Go to bed. Repeat. Catherine called once to confirm logistics, what time I needed to be at the courthouse, what to wear, what to expect. I answered in monosyllables. She didn't push. I had no idea that during that same week everything was changing. That the daughter I thought I'd lost was starting to find her way back. Not to me, not yet, but to something that might eventually lead there. I didn't know any of this until after the trial, when Elodie finally told Catherine everything, and Catherine much later told me. The subpoena arrived on a Tuesday, delivered to the loft around noon by a process server. Elodie had been working from home, still on administrative leave from her job, trying to keep busy with freelance consulting work. The envelope was official. County SIL. Her full name typed across the front, Elodie Marie Clark Sawyer. She'd known what it was before opening it. Had been half expecting it since the preliminary hearing, but seeing the words in black and white, "You are hereby commanded to appear as a witness," she made it real. The subpoena didn't specify what she'd be testifying about, just that the state required her presence. That failure to appear could result in contempt charges. She'd sat on the couch with the paper in her hands for a long time. Long enough that Dominic came home and found her still sitting there. "What's that?" he'd asked. She'd shown him. Watched his expression shift from confusion to calculation. "Don't worry about it," he'd said. "They're just trying to intimidate you. You don't have to tell them anything. Spousal privilege." But Elodie had done enough research to know spousal privilege didn't work the way Dominic seemed to think. Not when she might have been involved herself. Not when the prosecutor could argue she wasn't just a spouse, but a potential co-conspirator. After Dominic left the room, she'd pulled out her laptop and started searching. Legal terms she barely understood. Accessory after the fact. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Obstruction of justice. She'd called Owen Fletcher 3 years ago. Had told him to drop his complaint against Dominic. She'd thought she was protecting her marriage, helping her husband through a rough patch. But now, staring at that subpoena, she'd realized what it actually was. What she'd actually done. She'd helped cover up a crime. The panic that set in was unlike anything she'd felt before. The kind of fear that came from recognizing you'd built your entire life on a foundation that was crumbling. She'd started going through old files, boxes they'd kept in a closet since Beth's death, estate documents, papers she and Dominic had stored away and never looked at again. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. Some kind of clarity, maybe. That's when she found the bank statement. Beth's account. January 2023. A single line transfer to DS Financial Consulting, LLC. Amount $22,000. DS Financial. Dominic Sawyer Financial. $22,000. 4 months before Beth died. She'd pulled out more papers, found a printed email tucked between bank statements, from Dominic Sawyer to Beth Clark. Date January 20th, 2023. Subject, "Thank you, dear Mom Beth. I can't express how grateful we are for your generosity. The surgery went well, and the doctors say my mother should make a full recovery." Elodie had read it twice. Then she'd pulled out her phone and searched for Dominic's mother's name. Found her listed at a nursing facility in New Jersey. Alive. No record of emergency surgery. No record of any surgery at all. The email was fake. The whole thing was fake. Dominic had stolen $22,000 from her mother, from Beth. While Beth was dying of cancer, had invented a crisis that didn't exist, and taken money from a woman too kind and too sick to question him. Elodie sat on the floor of their closet, surrounded by papers, with one hand pressed against her stomach, where an 8-week-old cluster of cells was slowly becoming a person. And she'd thought, he scammed my mother. He scammed me. What kind of family will my child grow up in? She'd waited until that evening to confront him. Had spent the afternoon taking photos of everything with her phone. The bank statement, the email, every piece of evidence. Sent them all to her personal email with the subject line, "Keep these." When Dominic came home, she'd been standing in the kitchen with the papers spread across the counter. "What's this?" she'd asked, holding up the bank statement. He'd glanced at it. "Old paperwork from your mom's estate. Why, she took $22,000 to your LLC 4 months before she died." Something in his expression shifted. The easy confidence flickered. Beth wanted to invest in the business. It was her choice. Now she was dying, Dominic. She could barely get out of bed. And you asked her for $22,000. "I didn't ask," she offered. Elodie had held up the printed email. "This email about your mother's surgery. The emergency that never happened. Was that part of the offer too?" The silence that followed was all the confirmation she needed. When Dominic finally spoke, his voice had gone flat, cold. "Beth gave that money willingly. She was old. She was dying. What was she going to do with it? I gave her something better, a chance to help family, to feel useful." Elodie told Catherine she'd felt something break inside her in that moment. "She was my mother," Elodie had said quietly. She was dying anyway. Those 4 words, said so casually, like they justified everything. Elodie hadn't responded, hadn't argued, had just gathered up the papers and walked to the bedroom and closed the door. Sat on the bed with her phone and stared at the photos she'd taken. $22,000 stolen from a dying woman. Her mother, the grandmother her child would never meet. She'd opened her contacts, scrolled to a name she'd deleted and re-added 3 times over the past month. Catherine Pierce, attorney at law. Her finger had hovered over the call button, but she didn't press it. Not yet. Not that night. First, she needed to think. Needed to figure out what she was willing to do, what she was willing to risk, for herself, for the baby, for whatever came next. I didn't know any of this at the time. All I knew was that during the last week of June, something shifted. Catherine mentioned in passing that Elodie hadn't been returning Dominic's calls for a few days. Probably nothing, Catherine had said. Couples fight, especially under this kind of stress. I'd agreed, probably nothing. But now, knowing what I know, I understand it wasn't nothing. It was everything. It was the beginning of the end. Or maybe the beginning of something else entirely. I just didn't know it yet. The call came on a Monday morning, 2 weeks before the trial. I was sitting at the kitchen table with cold coffee and discovery documents Catherine had sent over, witness lists, exhibit numbers, legal motions I barely understood. When my phone buzzed, Catherine's name lit the screen. "Esmond," she said, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "We need to talk. In person. Can you be at my office in an hour? What's going on? Not over the phone. Trust me. You'll want to sit down for this." Her office occupied the 3rd floor of a red brick building downtown. The receptionist waved me straight through. Catherine was standing by the window, arms folded, expression unreadable. "Close the door," she said. I did. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. I sat. "Elodie came to see me," she said. I felt my chest tighten. "When?" "Last Thursday, late afternoon. She called ahead, used a burner number, said she needed to talk off the record." "Off the record?" My voice rose. She's married to the man who... I know. Hear me out. She didn't come to defend him. She came to bury him. I stared at her. Catherine walked to her desk, opened a manila folder, and slid a photograph across to me. It was a bank statement, Beth's account, January 2023. The same $22,000 transfer I'd found. Below it, a printed email, subject, "Thank you, Mom Beth." The fake surgery story. She brought this, I asked, among other things. Catherine pulled out a second sheet, a screenshot of a text thread between Elodie and Dominic dated August 2021. Owen's panicking. "I'll call him tomorrow. You handled the contract." I felt the room tilt. She admitted she helped him. Catherine said quietly. Not with the thefts themselves, she claims she didn't know the full scope, but with damage control. When Owen threatened to sue in 2021, Elodie called him. Told him a lawsuit would hurt his reputation. Owen dropped the case. "Jesus," I whispered. "There's more." Margaret Walsh Dominic sent her a follow-up email after the IPO collapsed. Elodie proofread it. She told me she thought it was just corporate spin. I clenched my fists on the armrests. "Why is she telling you this now?" Catherine met my eyes. "Because she's 12 weeks pregnant. The air left my lungs. She found out in June. Didn't tell Dominic right away. Then the subpoena arrived. Prosecutor's office wants her testimony. She panicked. Started digging through old files. Found your wife's bank statement in a box Dominic kept locked. That's when it clicked. She knew," I said, my voice hollow. "She knew he stole from Beth. She says she didn't. Not until she saw that statement. But she knew he was capable of it. And once she put the pieces together..." Catherine sat down, leaning forward. She called me because she wants to protect her child. She doesn't want to raise a baby with a father in prison and a mother facing conspiracy charges." I looked down at the photograph at Beth's signature on the deposit slip. "What does she want?" "A deal. She testifies against Dominic, full disclosure, in exchange for a plea on accessory after the fact. Suspended sentence, home confinement, probation. No jail time. The DA's considering it." "Why would they agree?" "'Cause without her, we have circumstantial evidence, contracts, bank transfers, your video. But Dominic's lawyer will argue each case separately. Elodie's testimony ties it together. She can confirm the coordination, the cover-ups, the intent. She makes the conspiracy charge stick." I sat back, rubbing my temples. "Do you trust her?" Catherine hesitated. "I trust that she's scared, and I trust that she loves that baby more than she loves him." She stood on the stairs and watched him hit me. I said, my voice cracking. She didn't move. "I know." Catherine's tone softened. "I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm asking if you'll let her testify. Because if she does, we win. Dominic goes to prison. The victims get restitution, and your grandchild doesn't grow up visiting parents behind bars." I closed my eyes. The image of Beth's broken frame flashed through my mind. The glass on her face, Elodie frozen in the hallway. "What happens next?" I asked finally. "She's meeting with the prosecutor tomorrow. If they approve the deal, she'll wear a wire." I looked up sharply. "A wire," Catherine nodded. "One more conversation with Dominic, on the record. If he admits anything at all, it seals the case." She told me later how it went down. Elodie invited Dominic to a downtown cafe the following Tuesday mid-morning. The recording device was taped under her bra. She ordered decaf. He ordered an Americano and complained about the prosecutor dragging things out. "They've got nothing," he said. "Owen's a flake. Margaret's elderly and confused. Your father's desperate." "What about Mom Beth?" Elodie asked, her voice steady. He glanced up. "What about her? So the 22,000. Did she really give it to you?" Dominic's jaw tightened. "She offered. I didn't force her. She was dying. She wanted to help." He leaned back, arms crossed. Look, people like your mom, like Owen, like Margaret, they're marks. They want to believe someone cares. I gave them that. It's not my fault they couldn't read the fine print. So you conned her. I gave her purpose, he said coldly. Don't make this about morality. The recording ran 38 minutes. Catherine played me the last 60 seconds in her office 2 days later. Dominic's voice, flat and dismissive. They're all stupid marks, Elle, even your mom. Especially your mom. I had to leave the room. Elodie moved out 72 hours before the trial. Catherine arranged it, hired movers, rented a storage unit, pulled permits, so Elodie could retrieve her things while Dominic was at his lawyer's office. She took her clothes, her laptop, prenatal vitamins, and the leather journal Beth had kept. Dominic didn't notice until that night. By then, Elodie was staying in a short-term rental across the county line under her maiden name. Catherine called me on Sunday evening. She's ready, she said. Wednesday afternoon, second day of testimony. The prosecutor will call her as a surprise witness. Dominic won't know until she walks through that door. I sat on the back porch, phone pressed to my ear. How is she? Terrified, determined. She asked about you. What did you tell her? Oh, that you're still deciding whether to forgive her. I didn't answer. Desmond. Catherine said gently. She's doing this for your grandchild. Whatever else she's done, she's trying to make it right. I thought of Beth, of the envelope of Elodie frozen on the stairs. Will it be enough? I asked. To convict him? Yes. To fix your family? That's not up to me. I hung up and sat in the dark for a long time. Wednesday, I thought. She'll walk into that courtroom and destroy the man she married. I wasn't sure if that would be enough. The courtroom smelled like furniture polish and old paper. I'd been inside a courthouse exactly twice before. Once for jury duty. I was excused from once to notarize Beth's will. This time I sat in the front row, Catherine beside me, her briefcase open on the bench. Across the aisle, Dominic sat at the defense table in a charcoal suit, white shirt, burgundy tie. His lawyer, Gregory Hunt, was older, silver-haired, comfortable-looking. The bailiff called the court to order. 12 jurors filed into the box, 6 men, 6 women. A retired teacher, a grocery store manager, a construction worker, ordinary people. The prosecutor stood. Deputy District Attorney Sarah Ling, mid-30s, dark hair in a tight bun. Honey, this case, she said, is about power. About a man who used intimidation, manipulation, and violence to control the people closest to him. You will see video evidence of the defendant assaulting the victim in his own home. You will hear testimony from multiple witnesses that establishes a pattern of predatory behavior spanning 3 years and involving over $200,000 in fraud. She paused. The evidence will speak for itself. Hunt rose slowly. My client is not on trial for being a bad businessman. He's here because his father-in-law is angry, embarrassed, and looking for someone to blame. At the end of the day, this case hinges on one question. Did Desmond Clark provoke a reaction, then weaponize it? I believe the answer is yes. They played the video first. The courtroom went silent as the prosecutor queued up the doorbell footage. The timestamp read April 14th, 2024, 3:47 p.m. Dominic's voice came through the speaker, distorted but clear. 32,000. That's all I'm asking. My own voice quieter. I'm not giving you anything. Then the sound, a crack, like a branch snapping. My head jerked to the side. Dominic's hand was still raised. The camera caught Beth's picture frame tumbling off the mantel glass, shattering. Someone in the jury box flinched. The prosecutor paused the video. Mr. Clark, is that you on the screen? I stood, walked to the witness stand, placed my hand on the Bible. Yes, I said. And can you describe what happened that afternoon? I took a breath, glanced at the jury. My son-in-law came to my house. He demanded money. I refused. He struck me. Then he left. Did you provoke him in any way? No. Did you threaten him? No. Did you touch him? No. Ling nodded, then turned to Hunt. Your witness. Hunt approached with a thin smile. He held a printed screenshot my social media post from June. Mr. Clark, do you recognize this? I looked at the image. My own words. Dominic Sawyer is a con artist. He stole from my family. I have proof. Yes, you posted this publicly correct, naming my client, accusing him of theft. Yes, before any trial, before any conviction. Yes. Hunt turned back to me. Do you think it's possible that you wanted a confrontation that day? That you refused your son-in-law's request because you were angry and you knew he'd react? I felt the fury rise in my chest. No, I said quietly. I refused because he had no right to that money. But you didn't just refuse. You escalated. You posted online. You involved the press. You made this personal. He made it personal. I said, my voice harder now. When he struck me in my own home, Hunt held my gaze for a moment, then nodded. No further questions. Day 2 brought Owen. He walked to the stand in a button-down, and khakis, the scar on his chin visible. Collins asked him to recount the $65,000 investment in 2021. Owen spoke steadily, pulling documents from a folder. Emails, wire transfer receipts, a contract signed by Dominic. After 6 months, Owen said, I asked for an update. He stopped returning calls. I drove to the address on the contract. It was a UPS store. Mailbox rental. What happened when you confronted him? Owen touched his chin. He told me I'd misunderstood the terms. When I threatened to sue, he grabbed me. I fell. Hit my face on a parking curb. Did you file charges? No. His wife called me. Said a lawsuit would hurt both of us. That I should let it go. Catherine squeezed my wrist. I kept my face blank. Hunt's cross was aggressive. He called it a business dispute, suggested Owen had ignored red flags. But Owen didn't flinch. I invested in good faith, Owen said. He lied. Then he hurt me. That's not a dispute. That's fraud. The jury took notes. Wednesday, day 3. Margaret appeared first via Zoom from Arizona. She was calm, methodical, walking through the fake IPO pitch, the $48,000 wire transfer, the vanishing company. Robert followed, testifying about the $38,000 loan. Then Collins asked him about Beth. Oh, your sister, she said gently. Did she ever mention lending money to the defendant? Robert nodded. After she passed, I found a bank statement. $22,000, January 2023. Transferred to DS Financial. I felt the courtroom tilt. Ling projected a spreadsheet on the screen. 5 names, 5 amounts, totaling $201,000. Ah, Your Honor. Hunt stood. The state is introducing alleged victims who are not part of the criminal complaint. It's pattern evidence, Collins said calmly. It establishes modus operandi, motive, and intent. The judge adjusted her glasses. I'll allow it. Ling turned back to the jury. You've now heard from 4 victims, Owen Fletcher, Margaret Walsh, Robert Brennan, and the late Beth Clark. 4 separate incidents. 4 fabricated stories. $201,000 stolen. And in 2 cases, violence or threats when the victims pushed back. She paused. That's not bad luck. That's a pattern. Late Wednesday afternoon, the judge called a recess. When court reconvened, Collins stood at her table. Your Honor, the state has 1 more witness. We'll call them tomorrow morning. Hunt looked up sharply. Your Honor, we were not notified. The witness came forward late in discovery, Collins said smoothly. We disclosed their identity to defense counsel this morning. The judge glanced at Hunt. Counselor, Hunt's jaw worked. He looked at Dominic, who shrugged, slightly unconcerned. No objection, Hunt said finally. For now, the judge nodded. We'll reconvene at 9 a.m. Court is adjourned. I watched the jury file out, some glancing back at Dominic, some at me. Catherine closed her briefcase. "Tomorrow," she said quietly. I nodded, my hands trembling. Across the aisle, Dominic stood adjusting his tie, his face calm. He thought he'd already won. He had no idea. "Stop. Before I tell you who walked into that courtroom, comment witness below. I want to see how many of you made it this far. Because when that door opened on Thursday morning, even I, who knew what was coming, felt the air leave the room." Quick reminder, the scene you're entering has been shaped with some fictional touches to carry the emotional stakes forward. If that's not for you, feel free to exit now. But if you want to know who stood up and destroyed Dominic in front of 12 strangers, stay right here. Thursday morning arrived with a sky the color of old bruises. I sat in the same front row seat I'd occupied for 3 days, Catherine beside me. The gallery was fuller than before, reporters in the back rows, strangers who'd read Nina's article. The air smelled like floor wax and nerves. Dominic sat at the defense table in a navy suit, his posture relaxed. Hunt leaned close, whispering something. Dominic smiled faintly. He thought the worst was over. One more witness, probably a forensic accountant. He had no idea. The bailiff stood. "All rise." The judge entered. We sat. The jury filed in 12 faces I'd memorized over 3 days. Deputy D.A. Collins stood. "Your Honor, the state calls its final witness." She turned toward the double doors at the back of the courtroom. They opened, and Elodie walked in. The room went silent. She wore a loose gray blouse and black slacks, her hair pulled back. Her belly curved gently beneath the fabric, 12 weeks. "My grandchild." Dominic's head snapped toward the door. His mouth opened. Hunt froze mid-note. I couldn't breathe. Elodie walked down the center aisle, eyes fixed on the witness stand. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Dominic. She kept her gaze forward, shoulders back, hands clasped in front of her belly. The bailiff gestured to the stand. She climbed the steps, sat, smoothed her slacks. Her hands were shaking. The clerk approached with the Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" Elodie's voice was barely a whisper. "I do." Ling stepped forward. "Please state your name for the record." "Elodie Clark Sawyer." "And what is your relationship to the defendant?" Elodie's throat worked. "I'm his wife." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The judge tapped her gavel once. Ling's tone was gentle. "Ms. Clark Sawyer, why are you here today?" Elodie looked down at her lap. "Because I helped him." She told it all. Owen Fletcher, the phone call in 2021 after Owen threatened to sue. Elodie had told him a lawsuit would destroy both their reputations, that Owen should walk away quietly. Owen had dropped the case. Margaret Walsh. The follow-up email after the fake IPO collapsed. Dominic had drafted it. Elodie had proofread it, made it sound legitimate. And Beth, Elodie's voice cracked. "In June, I found a bank statement. My mother transferred $22,000 to my husband's LLC in January 2023. I didn't know about it. I asked him why. He said she offered." "Did you believe him?" Collins asked. "At first, but then I found the email, the one about his mother's surgery. It was fake. His mother's fine. I called her." The jury leaned forward. "I thought I was protecting my husband." Elodie said, her voice steadier now. "I thought the accusations were misunderstandings. But he lied to my mother when she was dying. He stole from her. And when I confronted him, he told me she gave the money willingly because she was weak." She looked up finally, and her eyes found Dominic. "I can't let my child grow up in a family built on lies." Ling held up a manila folder. "Ms. Clark Sawyer, do you have evidence to support your testimony?" "Yes." Ling pulled out printed emails, screenshots, bank transfers. She submitted them as exhibits, projected them on the courtroom screen. Then Collins held up a small digital recorder. "Your Honor, the state would like to play a recording made by the witness on July 2nd. It's a conversation between Miss Clark Sawyer and the defendant. Hunt shot to his feet. Objection! Overruled, the judge said. Ling pressed play. Dominic's voice came through. Look, people like your mom, like Owen, like Margaret, they're marks. They want to believe someone cares. I gave them that. Elodie's voice quieter. So you conned her. I gave her purpose. Don't make this about morality. A pause. Then, they're all stupid marks, Elle. Even your mom, especially your mom. The recording stopped. The silence was suffocating. I felt the metallic taste flood my mouth. Across the aisle, Dominic's face had gone white. Hunt stood for cross-examination. Ms. Clark Sawyer, isn't it true that you're testifying to save your father from a defamation lawsuit? No, Elodie said. That you fabricated this recording? No. That you're lying to protect yourself from accessory charges? Elodie's jaw tightened. I helped him. I didn't know the full extent, but I helped. And I'm taking responsibility for that. But I won't let him destroy what's left of my family. Hunt glanced at Dominic. No further questions. Dominic erupted. He stood knocking his chair back. You're nothing to me, he shouted. You're crazy. The judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Mr. Sawyer, sit down. She's lying. She's trying to... Bailiff. Two officers moved toward the defense table. Dominic shoved Hunt's hand away, jabbed a finger toward Elodie. You'll regret this. You and your father both. The bailiff grabbed his arm. Dominic struggled. The second officer seized his other arm, and together they hauled him toward the side door. You're nothing, Dominic screamed as the door swung shut. Nothing. The courtroom sat frozen. Elodie covered her face with her hands and sobbed. The judge called a recess. The jury filed out silent. I stood. My legs felt hollow. Catherine touched my shoulder. Go, she said quietly. I walked to the witness stand. Elodie was still sitting, hands pressed to her belly. When she heard my footsteps, she looked up. Her eyes were red, swollen. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to hold her. Instead, I said, you did the right thing. She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. Take care of the baby, I said. Then I turned and walked back to my seat. When court reconvened, Collins delivered her closing argument. She recapped the video, the testimony, the pattern of fraud, the recording. She reminded the jury that Dominic Sawyer had struck his father-in-law, stolen from a dying woman, manipulated his own wife, and showed no remorse. Hunt's closing was weaker. He tried to frame Elodie as a scorned wife, but his voice lacked conviction. The judge gave instructions. The jury left to deliberate. I walked into the hallway. Catherine stood by the water fountain. How long? I asked. Could be hours, could be tomorrow. I nodded. My chest felt tight. Through the narrow window, I could see Elodie sitting alone in the front row, her hand resting on her belly. You okay? Catherine asked. I don't know, I said. Catherine squeezed my arm. You will be. For the first time in 11 weeks, I felt the fury in my chest begin to loosen. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something close to relief. Friday morning came too fast and too slow. I sat in the same front row seat, Catherine beside me. The gallery was fuller than yesterday. Owen in the third row, Margaret's daughter flown in from Arizona, Robert near the back. Reporters lined the rear wall. Dominic sat at the defense table in the same navy suit tie loosened. Hunt whispered something. Dominic didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the empty jury box. The bailiff stood. All rise. The judge entered. Bring in the jury, she said. They filed in slowly, 12 people who'd heard 4 days of testimony, seen the doorbell video, listened to my daughter sob on the witness stand, heard the recording of Dominic calling my wife a mark. The judge turned to the jury foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? He stood. We have, Your Honor. Please read it. The foreman unfolded a slip of paper. In the matter of the state versus Dominic Sawyer on the charge of assault in the 4th degree, We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. The word landed like a stone in still water. The foreman continued. On the charge of fraudulent conduct as part of a pattern of criminal behavior, we find the defendant guilty. The judge nodded. Thank you. The jury is dismissed. Catherine squeezed my hand. I couldn't feel it. My chest was tight, my throat dry. I'd waited 11 weeks for this moment. Guilty. The word felt too small for what it carried. The judge called for sentencing arguments. Collins recounted the assault, the video evidence, the pattern of fraud. She recommended 18 months in a state facility, 5 years of probation, full restitution to the victims, and a restraining order. Hunt argued for leniency, no prior criminal record, financial hardship. He asked for probation, anger management classes, community service. The judge listened without expression. Then she spoke. Mr. Sawyer, please stand. Dominic rose slowly, face pale. You were convicted by a jury of your peers of assaulting your father-in-law and engaging in a pattern of fraudulent behavior that caused significant harm to multiple victims. What troubles this court most is the callousness, the contempt you demonstrated toward people who trusted you. Your wife's own mother, suffering from terminal illness, was one of your victims. That is unconscionable. Dominic's hands clenched at his sides. This court sentences you to 18 months in a state correctional facility, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $180,000. My breath caught. 180, not 201. The court has excluded certain claims due to insufficient direct evidence for criminal restitution. The late Beth Clark's transfer, while morally reprehensible, lacks the documentary proof that the other cases provided. That matter may be pursued in civil court by her estate. I felt Catherine's hand tighten on mine. You are further prohibited from contacting the victims, including Desmond Clark and Elodie Clark Sawyer, for a period of 10 years. Do you understand? Dominic's voice was flat. Yes. Bailiff remanded the defendant. 2 officers approached. Dominic didn't resist as they cuffed his wrists. He glanced once toward the gallery, then he was gone. The courtroom emptied slowly. Catherine gathered her files. Owen nodded at me and left. Robert shook my hand without speaking. I sat alone, staring at the empty defense table. 18 months, 5 years probation. 180,000. It should have felt like victory. It felt like ash. Elodie's hearing was held an hour later in a smaller courtroom down the hall. She stood before a different judge. Deputy D.A. Collins outlined the plea agreement. Elodie Clark Sawyer had cooperated, fully provided critical testimony, and accepted responsibility for her role as an accessory. In exchange, the state recommended 6 months of home confinement, 3 years of probation, and 200 hours of community service. The judge asked Elodie if she understood the terms. Yes, Your Honor, Elodie said quietly. Do you accept this agreement? I do. The judge looked at her for a long moment. Ms. Clark Sawyer, you made serious errors in judgment. You enabled harm. But you also chose ultimately to do the right thing. The court accepts your plea. You will serve 6 months of home confinement beginning today, with exceptions for medical care related to your pregnancy. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Now then, this court is adjourned. I waited outside on the courthouse steps. The July sun was brutal white and unforgiving. Catherine had left to file paperwork. I stood alone, hands in my pockets. The door opened behind me. I turned. Elodie stepped out, blinking in the sunlight. She wore the same gray blouse from yesterday. Her eyes were red, swollen. She saw me and stopped. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she walked toward me slowly, hands clasped in front of her. "Did," she said, her voice barely audible. I waited. "I'm sorry." Her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry." I looked at her, my daughter, my only child, the girl I'd taught to ride a bike, the woman who'd stood frozen while her husband struck me, the woman who'd helped him, lied for him, the woman who'd finally stopped. I didn't know what to say, so I nodded, just once. Her face crumpled. She covered her mouth with one hand, tears spilling down her cheeks. I didn't walk away. I didn't reach for her either. I just stood there, the sun beating down on both of us, and let the silence hold what words couldn't. I drove home alone. The highway stretched flat and gray ahead of me. The radio played something low. I turned it off. The passenger seat was empty. It had been empty for 2 years, but today it felt heavier, like Beth's absence had weight. I wondered what she would think, whether she'd be proud that I'd fought, or angry that I'd destroyed what was left of our family. Whether she'd forgive Elodie faster than I could. I didn't have answers. The fury in my chest had loosened. Not gone, just quieter. Dominic would spend the next 1.5 years in prison. Elodie would spend the next 6 months in her apartment, monitored alone. My grandchild would be born in January into a family fractured beyond recognition. Justice, they called it. It didn't feel like enough, but it was all I had. I pulled into my driveway as the sun dipped below the roofline. The house was dark. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and set my keys on the table beside Beth's picture, the frame I'd replaced the glass I'd swept up 11 weeks ago. Her face smiled back at me, frozen in a moment, before the sickness, before Dominic, before everything shattered. "Well, we won," I said quietly. The house didn't answer. I sat down on the couch alone and let the exhaustion take me. The first weeks of August passed in silence. I didn't call Elodie. I didn't visit. Catherine told me she'd been fitted with an ankle monitor, moved into a small one-bedroom apartment, reported to her probation officer every Thursday. I nodded and filed the information away. Instead, I wrote. I sat at my desk every morning and worked on a new novel, something lighter, a story about a man rebuilding a cabin after a wildfire. The metaphor wasn't subtle. I called it survival. Owen stopped by one afternoon. We sat on the porch with iced tea, and he asked if I'd heard from Elodie. "No one," I said. He nodded. "She helped you win. That counts for something." "She helped him first," I said quietly. "That counts too." The letter arrived on a Tuesday in mid-September. Handwritten pale blue stationery, my name in Elodie's careful cursive. I set it on the kitchen table and stared at it for 2 days. On Thursday night, I opened it. "Dad, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if I deserve for you to read it. But I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I stood on those stairs and did nothing. I'm sorry I didn't ask questions when I should have. I'm sorry I let Dominic use Mom's grief, her kindness, her trust. I'm having a boy. Due in January. I'm not giving him Dominic's last name. I'm giving him yours. Clark. I love you, Dad. Elodie." I read it 3 times. Then I sat at the kitchen table and cried. I called her on Sunday. "I got your letter," I said. "I meant every word," she whispered. "I know. Can I call you again?" I closed my eyes. "You can call." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. I visited her in October. We assembled a crib together, neither of us mentioning the trial or Dominic. After 20 minutes, the frame stood upright. Elodie sat back, wiping her eyes. "Mom would have loved this. She would have loved him. Your son." We cried together for the first time in 2 years. November and December blurred together. I visited twice a week. Fixed things. Brought supplies. Elodie told me Dominic called from prison once. She didn't answer. Called again. She blocked the number. "I don't want him in our lives," she said. "Not mine, not Henry's." "Good Mom," I said. Henry Clark was born on January 18th at 6:43 in the evening. Elodie's water broke at 4 in the morning. She called me, breathless, terrified. I drove across town in the pre-dawn dark and took her to the hospital. Labor was long. At 7:30, a nurse called my name. Elodie sat propped against pillows, exhausted and radiant. In her arms, wrapped in a pale blue blanket, was a tiny red-faced boy. "My dad," she said softly. "Meet Henry." She placed him in my arms. He was warm, impossibly light. dark hair just like Beth's. I looked down at him, and something in my chest cracked open. All the fury, the grief, the months of rage, it didn't disappear. But it shifted, made room for something else. He looks like her, I whispered. Elodie wiped her eyes. I know. I thought of Beth, of the envelope, the broken frame, the trial. I thought of all the things she'd never see. This room, this baby, this fragile forgiveness. I bent close to Henry's tiny ear and whispered, "You'll grow up with truth and love. I promise." His hand curled around my finger. Behind me, Elodie said quietly, "Mom would be so proud of you." I didn't answer. I just held my grandson and let the tears come. For the first time in 10 months, they didn't taste like ash. They tasted like hope. April came quietly. I sat at my oak desk on a Thursday afternoon, the same desk where I'd opened Dominic's envelope 10 months earlier, and looked at the picture frame beside my laptop. Beth smiled back at me, new glass, same photograph, taken on a hiking trail 3 years before the cancer. I'd replaced the frame in February. The old one, shattered in April, had sat in a drawer for months. Catherine had texted me one night, "You should fix it." She'd want you to. So I did. 10 months. It felt like a decade. It felt like yesterday. Dominic was 9 months into his sentence at a state correctional facility. His appeal had been denied in March. He'd filed for bankruptcy in February. The restitution payments had begun trickling out to the victims. Owen received $15,000. Margaret got 10. Robert 8. Elodie had 2 months of house arrest left. 7 months in a small apartment with an ankle monitor, a probation officer who visited every Thursday, and a baby who woke her up 3 times a night. I helped with Henry 2 or 3 times a week, showing up with diapers and board books. Henry was 3 months old now. He looked more like Beth every day. The call came on a Thursday afternoon in mid-April. "Dad." Elodie's voice was bright, breathless. He smiled. "What?" "Henry." He smiled at me. A real smile, not gas, not a reflex. I was changing his diaper and singing that silly song you taught me, and he just looked at me and smiled. I felt my throat tighten. "I wanted you to know," she said softly. "I know Mom can't see it, but I wanted you to know. Thank you. I love you, Dad. I love you too." That night, I sat at my desk and looked at Beth's picture. "We did it," I said quietly. "Elodie and Henry are going to be okay." Her face didn't change. The photograph couldn't answer. But I felt it anyway, some small shift in the air, some loosening in my chest. I opened my laptop. I'd started a new manuscript 2 weeks earlier. Not the cabin story my agent was expecting. This one was about Beth, about meeting her at a bookstore when we were both 25, about the wedding on a rainy October afternoon, about the year she fought cancer, about the envelope, the betrayal, the trial, about learning to forgive, not because the hurt disappeared, but because carrying it was too heavy, about loss, about love, about what remains. I typed the opening lines again. My wife died on a Thursday in November. She left behind a journal, a broken picture frame, and 22,000 reasons for me to hate my son-in-law. It took me 10 months, a jury trial, and the birth of my grandson, to realize she'd left behind something else, too, the possibility of forgiveness. I read it back, changed a word, read it again. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. I saved the document, closed the laptop. The evening sun slanted through the window, warm and golden. I could hear birds outside settling into the trees. The neighborhood was quiet. Someone was grilling. The smell of charcoal drifted through the open window. I walked to the window. The street looked the same as it had a year ago. Same houses, same trees, same sky. But I wasn't the same. I'd spent 10 months carrying fury, metallic and cold, sharp enough to cut. I'd carried grief, too, for Beth, for the family we'd built. Some of that weight was still there. Maybe it always would be, but it was lighter now. Dominic was in prison. Elodie was rebuilding her life. Henry was learning to smile growing up in a home where lies didn't have power anymore. And I was here, still writing, still breathing, still learning how to live in a world without Beth, with a family fractured and stitched back together in ways I never expected. Not perfect, but enough. I turned back to the desk. Beth's picture caught the light, her smile that hiking trail the before. "I miss you," I said. The house was silent. I sat back down, opened the laptop, started typing again. Outside, the sun dipped lower. The birds quieted. The evening settled in warm and forgiving. And for the first time in 10 months, I felt something close to peace. If you've stayed with me through this entire family story, I want to leave you with something important. I'm not a religious man, but I've come to believe God doesn't hand us easy answers. He hands us choices. I chose to fight, not because I was brave, but because I couldn't look at my grandson and tell him I did nothing. This dad revenge wasn't cinematic. It was paperwork, sleepless nights, and a daughter I almost lost forever. If you're facing betrayal in your own family story, don't do what I did. Don't let rage drive the car. I pushed everyone away for months, nearly destroyed the only relationship that mattered. Seek help early. Talk to someone who loves you. Don't wait until the glass shatters. Every dad revenge comes with a cost. Mine cost me time I'll never get back with Elodie, moments Beth will never see. Justice felt hollow until I held Henry. That's when I understood the real victory wasn't the verdict, it was choosing to rebuild. So if this dad revenge and family story teaches you anything, let it be this: protect what's yours, but don't lose yourself in the fight. Leave a comment below. Has betrayal ever fractured your family? How did you heal? Subscribe to this channel if stories like these resonate with you, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for staying with me until the end. A gentle reminder: upcoming stories contain fictionalized elements crafted for reflective purposes. If this doesn't serve you, feel free to explore content that fits your journey better.